terror of the Franklin expedition.
It's a very exotic.
Safe and affordable home is a top priority for this council. We do not create healthy communities by turning our backs on those in need. That being said, what we heard loud and clear at committee on Thursday was that this city has a lot of work to do. I am encouraged by the work that is being done by our Housing Services Department, by the sector, and by councillors, because this is not an easy task. We have moved the pendulum forward in some areas, but we are struggling to maintain adequate services in others. We must be resolute in declaring that providing housing for our residents cannot be a this group or that group argument. We must find a way to address the many and varied demands, from housing with supports to rent subsidies and affordable housing to family shelters and much more. Those who are passionate about housing must work together, because there is no one perfect solution. There is also a reality check here. We don't have an endless amount of funding, and so we must take the opportunity of our midpoint review to really make sure that our efforts are in line with our priorities. And we will need upper-tier governments to fill in the blanks about how they intend to partner and the type of programs and level of commitment they intend to fund. The midpoint refresh will involve extensive consultation over the next year. The new CPSC committee and council will consider changes in 2019. I look forward to seeing what the future has in store, because I know that this city is capable of doing great things. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chair Deans, very much for your kind words, not just about the work of the committee, but the work of our report. I would certainly echo the need that Chair Deans articulated so well in her statement. It became, if it was not clear before, it became clear, I think, during the duration of that meeting, that affordability in housing, homelessness, and affordable housing are problems that exist throughout our entire community and touch everyone, regardless of whether you, at the outset, believe that they do or not. So this is a problem that is growing in Ottawa, and the delegations at committee gave us an opportunity to see the two Ottawas, the one that we so frequently see as we travel about our daily business, and the one that perhaps is experienced by many more in our community whom we didn't really realize it was affecting. And for those folks, people who are struggling to meet ends every day, people who are struggling to keep a roof over their head, their families fed, and their futures bright, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. I certainly commend Chair Deans and the staff for all of the work that they have done. I have not met one person in this entire endeavour who was not passionate about wanting to ensure that there was a better Ottawa in front for every single person that they met. Certainly, again, just in closing, Chair Deans mentioned that this is a collaborative effort. This is going to take all of us together to attack this challenge, and that's not just limited to governments, not just limited to social agencies and politicians and social workers. It extends to community. The more we can make homelessness, housing, and housing affordability kitchen table conversation in our community, the faster we can get to the point where we're all focused on the same goal: ending chronic homelessness in Ottawa and ensuring an affordable and prosperous Ottawa for all. Thank you very much.
Great, and I'll offer my thanks to Councillor Deans and Councillor Taylor, who, as you know, is our special liaison on housing and homelessness. I encourage you to read his report. It is an excellent roadmap to some of the issues that we have to deal with, and we appreciate all the effort that the members of CPS put into that day. I know it was a long day, but I think a very emotional day, with people coming forward with some very passionate comments and arguments, and we appreciate their input. So on the report, carried. Environment and Climate Protection Committee Report number 19, rapport numéro 19 du Comité de l'Environnement et de la Protection Climatique. Item 3, Source Separated Organics Program Update. So we'll hold that and come back. Finance and Economic Development Committee Report number 32, rapport numéro 32 du Comité des Finances et de Développement Économique, Reserves Review. Carried. And congratulations to staff. It shows a healthy balance in our reserves, and we appreciate the new initiatives that they have brought forward. Number 5, 2720 Richmond Road, option to repurchase. Hold by Councillor Shirelli. Item 6, Ottawa MacDonald Cartier International Airport Authority application for an exemption bylaw to the Retail Business Holidays Act. Carried. Item 7, Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment, 315 Chapel Street, modification au plan officiel et au règlement municipal de zonage 315 rue Chapel. A brief comment.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Simplement pour remercier les résidents qui...
Just wanted to thank the residents who took the church in charge and who are putting forward a project so that the site can remain sustainable in Sandy Hill. Thank you. And good luck with the project.
Amendment. Yeah. Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Official Plan Amendment 3071 Riverside Drive, modification au règlement de zonage et au plan officiel 3071. I think Councillor Harder and Tierney have a motion. Do people wish to hold this? Councillor Brockington, so we'll come back to that at that time. Item number 9, Zoning Bylaw, 851 Industrial Avenue, modification au règlement de zonage 851 Avenue Industrial. Carried. Dissent by Councillor Cloutier. Item number 10, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 2887 and 2895 Riverside Drive, modification au règlement de zonage 2887 et 2895 Promenade Riverside. Councillor Harder and Tierney have a technical amendment. Councillor Harder, please.
Yeah, thank you. We were asked to move this by staff, Mr. Mayor, and be it further resolved that no further notice be given. But really, what we're doing is that we therefore be it resolved the council approve the document 2 be amended by adding the following: the minimum required amenity space of 160 square meters, and the minimum landscape buffer around a parking lot at the northeast corner of 1 meter. And this is with regard to the youth services building.
So it's a technical amendment requested by staff on the motion. Carried. On the main report as presented. Carried. Thank you. Planning Committee Report number 60, rapport numéro 60 du Comité de l'Urbanisme. Item number 11, Appointments, Planning Advisory Committee Nominations, Comité consultatif d'aménagement du territoire. Carried. Item number 12, Development Charge Bylaw Review Councillors Sponsors Group. Révision du règlement municipal pour les redevances d'aménagement, groupe de parrains formés de conseillers. Carried. Transportation Committee Report number 30, rapport numéro 30 du Comité des Transports. Item number 13, modifying parking fees during the period of the CPR O-Train Bridge Replacement Construction. Modifier les frais de stationnement pendant la période de construction en vue de remplacement du pont du CPR O-Train. Carried. Item number 14, right-of-way patio bylaw, review of pedestrian clearway and accessibility requirements for existing patios. Règlement régissant les terrasses sur emprise. Carried. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? On the bulk consent agenda as presented? Carried. So we'll go back to the first item we've held. Item number 3, Source Separated Organics Program Update. Le point sur le programme de déchets organiques séparés à la source. Who would like to speak to this? Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had a chance to meet with staff last week, but in reading the report in greater detail and considering the matter, just had some additional questions to staff on the issue. The first was in understanding or trying to understand the technology that Orga World proposes to use to stream plastic shredding out from compostable material. Does staff know whether there are any other examples of this technology, and if so, what has been the general diversion rate in percentage terms of the amount of plastic that's successfully diverted? Is it 100 or is it something slightly less, 99.9? What is generally the diversion rate associated with the technology?
Mr. Mayor, I'll let Ms. Journeau give more detail, but the screening out of the plastic, the process that's being employed by World is currently employed in their London plant. And is probably, it's a very common technology that's used to screen out any number of impurities from a waste stream, or, including at Trail Road, where we have a soils processing facility, and we use screening processes to screen out all kinds of impurities that we want out of the reusable soil.
If I can add to that, so the screening process is very robust. World has 2 trommel screens that are used to remove plastics and other contaminants that may be in the waste stream. And it's also very regulated by the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, so those products are regulated products under the ministry, and they have to adhere to all of the regulations under the Ministry of the Environment.
Thank you for that answer. Just wondering if the technology does have a number associated with it in terms of the successful diversion rates.
I'm not aware of, I mean, basically they have to adhere to the regulations under the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change.
Okay, my next question concerns sort of zooming out a little bit and talking about waste diversion more broadly. I'm just curious whether staff have considered and what plans are for recommendations around banning single-use plastic bags in the City of Ottawa.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat the question. My apologies.
I'm just wondering whether solid waste staff have in their forward planning considered the possibility or looked at the possibility of banning single-use plastic bags.
I can start in that regard, and perhaps the general manager can follow on. With respect to the legal authority, I think there's some question. At present, there is yet to be a municipality in Ontario that has adopted a ban on plastic bags. You may know that the City of Toronto had attempted that back in 2012, had it actually passed that, and then reversed its decision following receipt of its own confidential legal opinion in that regard, and that was back in 2012.
And Mr. Mayor, just to further on that, the report that's in front of you is about resetting a contract, a somewhat troubling contract with World, and refreshing that contract in a number of areas, including our financial arrangement, our put-or-pay arrangement, and enhancing the service to residents, as you can see. In terms of plastic bags, the province has shown a little bit of leadership in the fact that you now have to pay at the point of purchasing your groceries. We also have take it back programs where residents can take their plastic bags back. But in terms of any long-term planning going forward, staff will be bringing forward a report probably in the first year of the next term of council on a whole wide range of solid waste initiatives, which will include comment on plastic bags. But as Mr. White indicated, I believe it is a higher jurisdiction, either provincial or possibly even federal.
Thank you. My next question involves a question around compostable bags. I know that some Canadian jurisdictions permit compostable bags in their organic stream without permitting plastic bags. Cities have established standards by which residents using a particular standard for a compostable bag can use that in their organic stream without provincial standards. City of Calgary does it. The province of Alberta does not have a compostable bag standard. Was that an idea that was considered by staff in the renegotiation of the World contract?
Mr. Mayor, the idea behind the usability and breaking down barriers towards the usability of the green bin program was to make it accessible for all. So residents are fully able to use a wide range of products to contain their organics to put into the green bin from continuing, and we would encourage them to continue with compostable paper packaging, to use other packaging in the household. If they wish to go out and buy compostable plastic or biodegradable plastic bags, as well as plastic bags. The retention time at Orga World is not sufficient in understanding to totally break down a biodegradable plastic bag. But it was considered, and really the philosophy here is to break down all barriers. So if going out and purchasing a special bag to participate in the green bin product the green bin program is a barrier to a certain individual or family, we didn't want that to be a barrier.
So in terms of understanding whether compostable bags have sufficient time to be composted, I'm just wondering if staff had the chance to look at the City of Calgary example and whether or not they successfully biodegrade their compostable bags or whether that ends up in the landfill.
Mr. Mayor, there's no dispute that they biodegrade. They do biodegrade over time, and it depends on the type of process that the municipality is using to run their green bin program. I believe Calgary has a different processing technology that probably has a longer retention period, but we're not sure. We can look into that for the councillor, no problem.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
All right, thank you. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start by telling the members that I support this initiative. I think it's a good first step. It's not perfect, of course. We would like that all plastics that are used only once be totally eliminated, but that requires a deeper conversation. Mr. Mayor, I would like to have more detail. If the objective is to increase the participant to this program, what can we do so that condominiums and big buildings use the program? How can we encourage them to use the bigger bins that are available?
Mr. Mayor, yes, multi-residential buildings are a huge problem and barrier towards waste diversion in general. So not only it's a challenge to get green bins into those facilities, but it's a challenge to get blue and black box recycling rates up. We work individually with each condo board or property management company on an individual basis on how to implement those buildings or implement programs into those buildings. So yes, we will look at a wide range of containers and options to facilitate waste diversion in those facilities.
Yeah, what sort of timelines are we looking at for that?
So we've committed to establishing a working group with the EOLA and BOMA and CCOC and other agencies. And we'll try and work with them to develop initiatives to facilitate getting those programs up and running.
Okay. I know that if I speak about OCH specifically, our townhouses who have curbside pickup, we do have a high usage of the green bin. We do struggle with the pads, right? Those bigger pads where accountability for recycling and garbage is a challenge. And I know in our conversation you discussed a bin that could be made available for organics. So in my mind, that's certainly, OCH as being the city's biggest landlord can be a partner in this change. Maybe as a wrap up for me, I think that there's a lot at play here. In 2023, the province is putting significant changes to what can go into landfills in Ontario. That will have major impacts locally. I think that the fact that the industrial, commercial, institutional waste aren't a purview of our authority is a challenge to come up with a holistic solution to waste diversion and to recycling and compost. Let's be clear that it's, in my mind, it's the goal of putting plastic bags in the green bin is to increase usage. We're not encouraging folks who are currently using the green bin to start that. I think, whatever's working currently for those who are using it, let's make sure that we continue on that, in that vein, and continue to grow it. This is really to reach out to the multi-res groups, landlords across the city, condominiums, who have not partaked in the program. And we have to be honest, too, at council that the additional 15 cents is for that triage portion of opening up the bag, taking the organics out, and then taking that bag into waste. It's not like we're keeping the plastic bag in the stream as part of the process. It's simply to facilitate what staff describe as the irk factor, which is unfortunate. And I think that the green bin is successful programs for residential, and I know that a lot of businesses would also like to be able to participate in the program.
Thank you. Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few clarification on the report. As you know, this facility, it is in my ward. But I have a question for staff. On page 51, we had in the revised contract, the city leaf and yard waste compost could be sold to Orga Ward at market rates, while wood chips from forestry operation, if available, could made available free to Orga Ward, no addition cost. My question will be why the city is giving Orga Ward wood chip rather than give it to Garden Center or make it available for the resident are free.
Mr. Mayor, wood chips and leaf and yard waste is a required component of Orga World's composting process. So as our tonnage of household organics goes up, they may need to actually have a source of woody type material to ensure that their process continues to work. So we've, as part of our negotiated outcome with Orga World, we have offered the ability to give wood chips if they're available and not for other uses within the city, that those wood chips could be made available to Orga World.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that, the idea was actually to create an efficiency for the city, so forestry crews in the east end of the city, rather than going all the way to Trail Road, would be able to go to Orga World. It's more efficient for them, and it's a win for Orga World.
Okay, so that makes sense. My other question is, what this is in the impact on the yard and leaf waste in the collection? Right now, I can see in the report that residents will not be able to bundle their branches and if they're properly tied up and put it on the curb. Is that going to be in the new process, or we're still going to be able to collect those?
Mr. Mayor, it's status quo with regards to the leaf and yard waste collection. So residents are still encouraged to bundle and tie those bundles of branches next to their green bins. If they're putting leaf and yard waste outside of the green bin, it has to be in paper bags. And that gives us the option to bring it to Trail Road for composting.
Thank you. Did the staff looked at giving the resident incentive? Like in the weekend, the resident, they like to clean their yard and they like to clean, their backyard and put them in a trailer and take them down. And I know that now we are selling them to Orga Ward. Why don't we give the incentive? Doesn't make sense to let the resident on the weekend to come and dump their yard waste and leaf instead of charging them for that? Because now we're double charging the resident.
We can look into that further and get back to you, Councillor.
I really appreciate if you could do that, because we hear it again and again from our residents. Saturday morning, they like to go out, clean their yard, and they drive it all the way on their own expense, and then again, we are charging them, so it's kind of double dipping on the resident. My other concern will be the smell and the odor that it's going to create from us now, the added collecting, the organic. Did we look at that and how it's going to impact and how it's going to be impacting the community and the area surrounding?
Mr. Mayor, part of the upgrades to the facility, Orga World's putting in about approximately $4 million in a new odor abatement system that's modeled over after the one in London. We've also asked for an odor mitigation plan from them, which we've received a draft already, and we will be getting a third-party technical expert to review that odor mitigation plan. And in our preliminary review, there's no extra odor. Well, there was no odor to begin with. I think there's been one, if any, complaints in all the time that Orga World's been at the Hawthorne Road facility, and the preliminary results are that there will be no change to that.
Thank you, but my concern is I understand. Let's say, is that all these going to be implemented before we start operation, like the construction and making sure we implement that extra odor facility?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Once we sign the contract, the enhanced contract in hopefully May, which we're gearing for, they'll start their construction right away. That construction has to be in place, as do their MOECC approvals, prior to the enhanced program starting, which we're anticipating 2019.
Would say that, let's say this is implemented and we start operation and we realize that the odor start leaking and we still have issues. What's the city have kind of legal, or do we have any mechanism to work with them or enforce them on dealing with these issues that it can create after? Because right now it's not operating, and what happened after we implement everything and we start collecting this garbage, we miss some element, or the smell start getting more and more, and how it's going to impact the community, and how we can challenge that.
First off, we're not anticipating odor issues with this plant. The feedstock at Orga World is significantly different than their London plant. So we're not taking in diapers. We are accepting leaf and yard waste. So we're not anticipating odor issues at the Ottawa plant. Also, the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change is responsible for odor problems at all facilities. Orga World has an environmental certificate of approval for that facility, and the ministry is the administrator of that certificate, and it's their position and their job to ensure that there aren't any odor issues at that plant as well.
Sure, but do we, as a city, do we have a clause, or do we have tools that we go back to them in case? And I'm happy if there's not going to be odor. Listen, I'm not trying to create an issue from doesn't exist now, but I want to make sure, and I want to assure my resident and the people who live surrounding around that area, because they have a concern, and it's truly that they should be concerned. How the city we can approach that, and do we have to reopen the contract, or we can deal with this without touching the contract? It's just to ease the anxiety of my resident.
As Mr. Wiley alluded to, we're requiring them to submit an odor mitigation plan. So if there is found to be odors coming out of that plant, they have to provide us assurances that they are going to adjust their operations to not only mitigate but eliminate those odor sources.
Thank you. I have a question concerning the transportation around the facility. Now we're going to is the usage going to increase, and the capacity of the trucking is going to be more on the road between Rideau and Hawthorne, of course, east and west. Did we look at that, and what's the impact on the community?
We are not anticipating any volume changes in the number of trucks going to the Orga World plant.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning to everyone. A few questions to staff first. What's the current lifespan of the Trail Road landfill?
It's expected currently to close at 2043.
2043, so that's not too far away. And what's the approximate cost to taxpayers to build a brand new landfill of that size within city limits?
The best estimates we have are based on the City of Toronto, who purchased the Green Lane landfill in St. Thomas approximately 15 years ago for $220 million.
So we've got 25 years to go, and in today's dollars, $250 million to get a new landfill up and running. So let's keep that in mind. Who around this table would like a new landfill in their ward? So not a lot of takers for a brand new landfill. So certainly expanding landfills, building new landfills is not something this city should be aiming towards. We should be looking at extending the life of that landfill indefinitely and trying to put as little as possible into that landfill. That is the ultimate goal for this municipality. The days of backing up trucks and dumping as much waste as possible in a giant hole and then piling dirt on top of it need to end sooner rather than later. The discussion around the lack of green bin use in multi-unit residential dwellings is something I raised at committee, something I feel strongly about, and I'm concerned about the lack of participation, particularly not just citywide, but in those multi-unit residential dwellings. And you stated that a working group is going to commence. Are you going to wait until 2019 when these changes go into effect, or will that working group get created more or less right away so that we're ready to go as soon as possible? Because regardless of this motion passes today, the problem is we don't have a fulsome green bin usage in multi-unit residential dwellings, and that needs to be addressed. So can you just clarify the plan?
Mr. Mayor, we will be starting right away, and my personal opinion is that we're removing the barriers to participation in a multi-unit building. We're going to hit the multi-unit buildings hard. We expect dramatic take-up of the program, and if we don't see that voluntarily, we'll be coming back to council.
Excellent, thank you. Just in essence, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, certainly the recommendation before us is not perfect. We do not want to see significant plastic going into the green bins. There's not a number of issues that have been raised by our residents about why they don't participate and how the potential use of plastic bags will help mitigate some of those concerns. And ultimately, I strongly believe that the net difference or the net impact will be positive, that we will be having much more waste diverted from the landfill, that will be, the organics that are collected, and that the vast majority of those plastics that are used will be pulled out of the system before that compost is released. And we were reminded at committee that before the compost that the city creates can be publicly released or used, it has to meet provincial regulations. It can't be filled with significant pollutants. So there is some checks and balances in that system. So Mr. Mayor, there definitely is a underusage of the green bin program in the city. The city must address this. The city is aware of some of the reasons why people don't participate, and I do believe that by expanding the program that we will be able to divert more waste from the landfill, which is the ultimate goal. So I am supportive of what's before us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Conseiller Manette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one question I have is majority of plastic bags right now go in the landfill. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. I listened to the debate that we had at the Environment Committee, and one of the things that is quite clear, and Councillor Brockington touched on it, is Green Bin program is a good program, but it's not working. The reason it's not working, it's not because it's not a good program, it's because we don't have enough of a buy-in to the program. Doing nothing at this point will not increase, the participation. Ever since we've had the debate about Green Bin, and I'm one of the councillors, there's some more around the table who have been here from day one, was always stated that people did not like the smell, they did not like what would happen once green bin would be sitting there. Using the plastics does not say, plastic bags does not say that we support plastic bags in any way. Actually, what it does say is the plastic bags that are out in circulation right now, let's put them to good use. And by putting them to good use is encouraging people to use the plastic bags that they have with the green bin and encouraging the uptake of participants. The other question that has always been asked is dog owners about pet waste. Why can it not be used? Again, this is a lot of comments I received, a lot of emails I received from residents that's saying this is a great idea, it's a long time coming, and now I will start using the green bin once it's in effect. So I guess in closing, the green bin program will work if you make it simple. If you make it difficult, it will not work. And I know the intent was always good, and there are a lot of people that are participating right now and doing it the way we had asked them to do it. We're not asking those people to change what they do. They don't need to start using the plastic bags. They should be continuing as they wish. But if we can get more residents participating, it will be, I believe, a better output for the city and a better outcome for the landfill. As was mentioned, as Councillor Brockington mentioned, the landfill lifespan is not that long when you look at it in terms of years. And if we don't do anything, all we're doing is shortening that lifespan. So I will be supporting this motion, and I hope that the majority of council will, and also residents of Ottawa will participate in a lot larger numbers that they have in the past. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Merci, conseiller. Councillor Blais, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering, we were talking about this earlier before the report came forward, Marilyn. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about the product that's produced in the new processing formulation and what the response is from the clients who actually buy that product. I'm particularly thinking of farmers who want to use that product in their farm operations. Either one, sorry, we were just chatting before. So.
The new contract allows OrgWorld a variety of beneficial use products. They're all used in the agricultural industry. So it includes NASM, which is land applied. It includes animal bedding and other products. I think the uptake on those products has been quite responsive, and they've been successful at marketing those materials.
Perfect, thank you. And just from and when you say they've been successful in those materials, you're talking about in other markets, in London or these other places that already accept plastics?
Yeah, so it's similar to City of Ottawa has a biosolids program where we land apply those materials, and we successfully get rid of 45,000 tons of biosolids every year. And we know from that program that the farmers absolutely love that material, and it replaces commercial fertilizers.
Yeah, perfect. Just operationally, if we get the uptake in the green bin that we're hoping for in the single family and the non-multi-res side of things, I can envision green bins not having enough space for all the plastic bags. Some people have 3 or 4 garbage cans at the end of their driveway. Are you going to be able to take your plastic bag that's full of green bin material and just leave it at the corner of your driveway, kind of outside of the green bin plastic box, and will it still get picked up? Like, have we thought through some of those just day-to-day practical, how is a family going to use it and benefit from it type of things?
We're going to continue to encourage people to put that material inside the green bin, because it's just simply too difficult for the waste collection operator to discern, is that a plastic bag full of garbage or is it a plastic bag full of organics?
And so will I be allowed, I have a family, we've got, 4 or 5 adults living at home and a couple of kids because it's a mixed family. Am I going to be allowed to have 2 or 3 green bins if that's what's needed to actually fit everything in the green bin? And is the city giving me the second and third one for free, or do I have to go drop a couple $100 in Home Hardware to do that?
No, we've always, if there were families that required more than one green bin, we have always given them additional green bins, and we will continue that practice in the future.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously, I stated my opposition to accepting plastics in the green bin at committee, and I'll be repeating that dissent today. I do want to understand quickly, and maybe Mr. White can help us. At committee, what we were told was that we cannot modify the contract to prohibit plastics in the green bin. This is an all or nothing package. We are either going to accept the contract as has been put in front of us, or we reject it outright and go back to renegotiate it. If we do pass this motion today, can we then turn around though tomorrow and unilaterally make a decision as a city that we are not going to accept plastics in the green bin?
Mr. Mayor, I think the reference to the contract is that what you're being presented with is a package, and it is either approved in whole, but it really can't be subdivided and approved in parts. Certainly, as was noted at committee, the business case that underlies the recommendation that staff are making and the assumptions on which it's based, including the uptake in terms of the collection of organics, are predicated on the inclusion of plastics today. Right. That said, there will be nothing in the contract that would preclude you from kind of reverting and saying we're not going to accept plastics anymore. That said, you may still be subject to the rate of production or the processing rate that is part of this revised contract.
Okay, and I am looking for some glimmer of hope coming out of today's decision on the assumption that this council is going to pass that. We can accept this contract today, but hopefully we'll be in a position very soon to have a serious discussion about the whole strategy. There are things that are probably going to be much more effective at increasing the diversion rate. Clear bags would be one of them, a limit on the number of bags. Have you come to the meeting today prepared, Mr. Wiley, at all, to talk a little bit more about the case for the increased diversion of waste out of our landfill through the green bin? At committee, we had a discussion about the evidence that allowing plastic bags is going to significantly increase diversion. Do you have any more quantitative evidence than we heard at committee a couple of days ago?
Mr. Mayor, as Mr. White said, the business case shows that there'll be a bump of about 5,000 to 6,000 tons at the implementation of the new enhanced program.
But I think some of that would be as a result of the addition of dog waste, for example, and we don't know whether we could accomplish the same diversion rate if we were to coerce the use of compostable bags for dog waste versus allowing either plastic or compostable bags.
Mr. Mayor, we didn't look, admittedly, we didn't look at the option of not including plastic bags and only including biodegradable plastic bags. My sense, though, is currently the program allows people to use newspaper or some other paper product, or to go and purchase paper compostable bags, which are probably about the same value at the supermarket as biodegradable bags. So I wouldn't expect, if we had a full biodegradable bag program, we may move the yardstick a bit. I don't think we would move the yardstick as far as we will, including the wide range of products that are available for use to participate in the green bin program.
And we could probably go back and forth all morning with what we think will happen. It's just unfortunate that we don't have that quantitative evidence to support it. If we do pass this, we are putting, I think, $600,000 into education efforts.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So I would ask you to use some of those significant new public relations dollars, communications dollars, to make residents as widely aware as possible that there is an alternative to plastic, that it's an inexpensive alternative, especially for those dog walkers who probably don't want to walk around with a paper bag of dog waste. Letting them know that there is a compostable option would be extremely helpful. anyways, we'll see how that strategy goes in the next term of council. I'm looking forward to eventually getting these plastics out of our waste stream. We can't do that today, but that needs to be our long-term goal. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, my wife and daughters are the biggest green bin fanatics there are in the city. I think my daughter made a video on how to make a green bin liner out of scrap paper and newsprint and stuff like that. Got thousands of hits. So our family will always do the green bin the way we've always done it. And this decision won't affect it. But I remember back when we dealt with the original contract, and a number of us on council, including myself and Councillor Harder and others, talked about the need to allow a simpler, less gross way of handling organics. And we tried to get people to buy into the idea of biodegradable bags or plastic bags, but nobody was hearing any of that because everyone thought virtually everybody in the city would participate even if we didn't do that. Well, we now know that about 60% are not taking part. And we know that for each one of those people, there's a huge amount of organics that does not make it to Orga World. So I think today we're recognizing that the people who've been doing it the traditional or the purist way can keep doing that, and it's still going to make that contribution. But we need to recognize that the perfect can be the enemy of the good, and if we keep insisting on what we're doing, we're going to have 60% of people not participating. So the evidence is there from the numbers that we need to make a change, and this change, while I think it was foreseeable years ago, it's clearly obvious today that we need to do something like this to get people to participate. And then, but the question for today really is this new contract or the old one. So this is your last chance to vote for the old Orga World contract. Okay. So I hope you don't take it, and I hope we vote for the new an improved contract that is much better in many ways. And yes, it's not perfect on the bag question, but on balance, it's a better outcome, I think, than leaving it the way it is.
Was that video on Rick TV, Councillor? Councillor Kakish, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think he only gets 5 hits on Rick TV. My quick question was with regards to the staff direction. In the report, Councillor Chernyshenko's motion talks about staff exploring the feasibility of including new items in the next couple of years. And my question is, what leverage or what opportunities do we have with Orga World to, let's say, with the coffee pods or the compostable cutlery that's mentioned there, if those work out well, how do we reopen or renegotiate, or is Orga World already on board with including new items in the future?
Mr. Mayor, Orga World's a willing partner. They would certainly include anything the city wants to include in the program. That won't be a problem. I think the point is in allowing new products to enter into the green bin is really twofold. One is, do they biodegrade appropriately in the system that we're using? And we can certainly test that, and we want to set up a protocol to test that properly, because you've probably heard there has been some ad hoc testing going on. But the greater question in my mind is, right now the province is bringing in producer responsibility for the blue and the black box, but have been remaining silent so far on the green bin. So do producers get a free pass into the green bin, or is there some other mechanism to allow them in the green bin? And I think that's maybe the trickier question that cities are going to have to grapple with prior to allowing additional biodegradable products into the green bin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of questions on another aspect of the report, and that is the pilot that staff's been talking about in terms of making containers, if you will, available in parks to deposit dog waste into. I'm wondering if you can give us a timeline for that, because I think that's a complaint that everybody around here gets. One thing that makes me absolutely crazy is when you're in a park, someone's gone to the trouble of bringing a bag, bagging the poop, and then leaving it there on the ground or hanging from a tree for some bizarre reason. Or maybe that's just my ward, but
No, it's not.
But maybe if you could give us a timeline of when and how that pilot is going to roll out.
We're proposing rolling out the pilot in the summer of 2019, sort of concurrent with the new enhanced service levels. We're going to try 10 different parks, so not just dog parks, but a combination of perhaps linear parks, multi-use parks, and dog-only parks. And we'll try a variety of different containers to see what is most appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I think that pilot will be very well received, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I sort of echo what Councillor Eagle said a little bit too, because I think we all have that problem. And I also have some people, for some strange reason, that put it in a plastic bag and tie them in a tree. Never been able to figure that one out. However, I wanted to raise a slightly different point. I actually don't like plastic going into this, but I understand the need and trying to get people involved. So I'm hoping that we will still continue to do a lot of education to people to encourage them not to use the plastic bags, not to use any kind of plastic, but to use biodegradable things. Wrapping it in newsprint works, for example, and keeps the maggots out. And there's lots of other ways you can do it. In fact, one of the things one person showed me was that in the summertime, if you get some maggots in there, just turn your green grain outside in your driveway and the birds will eat them within 24 hours, and then we're feeding the birds. Healthy food, too, for them. However, those are other issues. People have been talking and they've been contacting me, and I've heard this from others. Why aren't you letting restaurants go? Well, I know, and I think most council knows, that we're not allowed to. It's a provincial jurisdiction, and the province regulates all industrial and commercial waste, and they've been bringing in a little bit of change, but they haven't mandated it yet. I know in talking with Waste Management, they said, we asked them, why are you going to do this right away? Because they showed the ability on their new site to actually put in these types of things. They said, well, we can't afford to make them recycle their things right now because it costs a little bit more money for us to do that. And if we charge them more, then they'll go to the other people who do this service and don't do that. So they said we really need provincial regulations on this. I know we approached them some years ago to see what we could do about that. And I think they've made it a bit more mandatory, doing some plans and various other things with large ones, but I don't see them having dealt with the restaurant organic problem to any great extent. What could we do to encourage the province to make such regulations and to make it mandatory for restaurants particularly, because they do a lot of organics, but there's other kinds of recycling that all the business should be doing, and the only one they seem to do very much of it all is paper, and that's not enough.
So you're correct, Councillor. IC&I waste comes under the purview of the provincial government. There actually are regulations in place that govern waste diversion in the IC&I sector, but there is no teeth, and the province doesn't have the ability to enforce those regulations. With the new proposed organics framework, it actually specifically addresses IC&I waste, and they actually have the same targets or similar targets to municipalities. So the organics frameworks is actually saying that IC&I sector has to divert 50% of their waste by 2025. So they will be compelled to participate in these programs as well.
But if there's no teeth in the regulations and they don't have an enforcement mechanism, how are they going to actually make that happen? Now, we've actually done things like giving residences green bins and things to give them the tools they need to do this. I don't think the province, have you heard of anything like that? Or could we actually perhaps send a letter to them saying, you've got this in place now, you have the regulations, nobody's doing it, or very few are doing it because you don't make them. Can you give us a timeline of how you're going to bring in measures that will ensure that they actually start to meet that 50% diversion rate?
So staff actually did submit comments to the Ministry of the Environment exactly along those lines that you just addressed. what are the mechanisms to enforce that the IC&I sector complies. So we've already submitted those to the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, and we should be hearing very shortly on how they have addressed municipalities' concerns.
That would be important. I guess you'll send a memo around to us or something when that comes in so we can have some idea of how it's moving forward?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at Environment Committee, so I asked many of my questions and made my point pretty clear on how I stand on essentially the plastic bag, so I won't repeat any of that now, but just in the conversation today, a couple of questions have raised themselves for me. I just wonder if you can tell me how many tons of dog waste go into the Trail Road facility today?
We did audit information in 2014, and it's only 100 houses, so it's not exactly an exact science, but there's probably about 4,000 tons of pet waste that is going into the landfill at this time.
And dog waste?
Yes, dog waste, yes.
Okay, I thought you said cat. So
no, sorry, pet waste.
Pet waste. Okay, sorry. So did you look at, when you were renegotiating the contract, did you look at if we only allowed the addition of pet waste, which is significant, and I know that my household probably adds significantly to it, how close would we have gotten to our put or pay limit?
The issue with dog waste is it almost always comes encapsulated in a plastic bag. And so you can't really include dog waste without including the bag that it's contained within.
But compostable dog waste bags are prolific. I mean, they're everywhere. Even the ones I see tied up in trees in my neighborhood are mostly in compostable bags, because that's what you buy. Like anytime you go out and buy a box of dog waste bags, they're compostable. So, so on the plastic bags, if in say 4 or 5 years from now, either the city, which I hope will happen within the next few years, or the province were to ban plastic bags, am I correct to assume then that this levy would still apply to all taxpayers for the remainder of the contract? So we could, in essence, say be paying, everyone could be paying that 15-cent levy when, in fact, for something that we're no longer using. Is that correct?
The plant at Orgerworld continues to, so the biodegradable plastics are the same as regular plastics in that they don't break down at the facility. So that enhanced cost would also apply to the removal of the biodegradable plastics from the stream.
So there's no mechanism then within the contract that we have in front of us today, if plastic bags are no longer allowed through legislation, there's no way for us then to ask Orgerworld or renegotiate with Orgerworld, because my understanding is that compostable bags will break down, but they just need more time to do so. So I'm just, I think we need to be clear that if we allow plastic bags today, we are going to pay for them for 12 years, whether we're using that service or not. A little bit like, it seems to me like the last contract we had.
Mr. Mayor, I'll take that. Certainly, there's nothing that would prevent the city and Orgerworld from doing as they've done today and negotiating some change in the future. As to whether the use of compostable plastics versus non-compostable plastics would have a significant change in the actual process that Orgerworld has to go through and and recognizing that part of the additional fee is the capital improvements that are required for that processing, as to whether there'd be any change by virtue of the use of compostable plastic bags. I think that would be a question that we'd have to deal with in the future as to whether there'd be any justification then for some lower processing rate.
Yeah, sure, I understand that. So yeah, of course we can go back and ask them to renegotiate, but there's nothing compelling them to do so if we have to just keep paying that 15-cent levy until this contract ends. That could very well happen.
Mr. Mayor, as Ms. Journeau's pointed out, the processing of the waste coming in, whether it's in a biodegradable plastic bag or in a plastic bag, would not change. So the fee would remain.
Mr. Mayor, may I just add just one point, though, that gets lost in this also, and I think Councillor Chiarelli stated it best. If you keep the status quo contract, you're still maintaining a $2.7 million in payments for unused capacity until 2022. So when you add in all the numbers, this contract, even though there may be a 15-cent a month per household charge, also eliminates many of the worst things that were in the original contract.
Agreed, but we still are asking people who are using the green bin today to, they have been subsidizing those who haven't, and we're asking them to continue to, and we could be asking people to continue paying a levy for a number of years for a service that they can't use. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor McKinney. Councillor Caudry, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and just a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First of all, for those of us that are not on this table back when this contract with Orgar World was first negotiated, let me tell you the reason why the Orgar World came into our process, and it was because of increasing sizes of landfills, as well as new landfills that would have been required, as was mentioned earlier by staff. In our area, in terms of the West End, we have something called the CARP Mountain. Now, I know CARP only accepts industrial, commercial, institutional waste, but if you ever want to see a remnants of waste collection and how not to do waste, is that CARP Mountain. And as Jan mentioned earlier in her ward with the Trail Road. Now, having said all that, the contract initially may not have had the right terms, but one of the reasons why that contract may not have had the right terms was due to the fact that we were told at the time that plastic would not be acceptable in the green bin. And that, to me, at the time, and there were questions asked about that, and the reason given was the fact that it's not biodegradable or it's not something that will break down. The other piece to that was also that the farming community, as Councillor Blais asked earlier, requested, or not requested, but precious the compost coming out of Ottawa as the best compost that they could use on their land, on their farming areas. So now those are some of the reasons why the old contract was negotiated and why people sitting around this council table voted for it, because we saw a need to do something different. We saw a need to look at our practices of days gone by, of digging a hole and putting garbage in the ground. I took a trip out on the expense of council or a city to Sweden to see what they were doing differently. And in that country, they had pressure from 1973 when the price of fuel rose beyond their expected limits. So they had to go out and search for another source of energy. And the garbage stream for them became that source of energy. And in that country, they even went as far as recycling seaweed in order to get stuff to create biodiesel from. So, if there are other countries doing things better and different, then we should continue to be following some of those leads or creating our own leads. I think this contract today, looking at it, yes, there are some concerns with the use of the plastic and the end product that may come out of it. But in the long run, it is a good thing for the city, and it's definitely a good thing in terms of the West End with the Carp Mountain and other landfills that are around. Having said all that, I do have a couple of questions for staff. And one of those questions I think Councillor McKinney asked about about the dog waste. You mentioned, Ms. Giorno, about surveying 100 homes, and you got that number in terms of the audit that you did. Did you multiply that in any way, shape, or form to a bigger number, or thoughts of putting into a bigger household to see what exactly is the waste that we're collecting from dog waste, if you didn't have a true number?
It's based on audited information from those 100 homes. It is extrapolated out to address the 280,000 homes that are in the city right now, single-family homes. We'll also be doing audits again this summer, 4-season audits, so we'll be getting more up-to-date information as well on what the waste stream is consisting of at this point in time.
Thank you for that, Ms. Giorno, and we've had a couple of discussions over the last couple of days regarding the registration of animals, and you mentioned through bylaw that there were X number of dogs registered. Could we put that on the table as a public number?
I believe the number from bylaw services is that there is approximately 40,000 dogs that are have licenses in the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And the comment you made this morning, or I think you or Mr. Wiley made, regarding the pilot in parks starting in 2019, and you mentioned that there would be 10 parks selected to do that pilot. My question is, for this summer, currently, in terms of parks that have that pressure right now where the dog poop is dropped off into the garbage bins, is there anything that we could do this year for even a short period for the summer itself to put some green bins in those parks? Is that available? I know the compost or the waste will still go to a landfill, but at least we're doing a covered bin in parks rather than the open face bin.
The enhanced contract with Orga-World, the enhancements actually won't be in place until 2019. So even if we were to put green bins in parks, there would be nowhere for us to dispose of that material. In addition, the bylaw currently prohibits you from putting dog waste into park bins. So there's a lot of work that has to be done before 2019 to even contemplate allowing dog waste into bins in the parks. So the bylaw would have to be updated. We'd have to purchase the bins, all of these things, and we'd have to have a place to dispose of the material, which we don't have in 2018.
Okay, let me ask that same question in a different fashion. What happens if a resident puts a green bin out in the parks? Will the city empty that green bin?
If they were to roll it over to the curbside, but it could not be contaminated with plastic at this point. It would have to be pure organic material, and it would have to be household organic material.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thanks, Councillor Caudry. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think as Councillor Chiarelli aptly pointed out, those of us who were at the council table and responsible for signing on to that last Orga-World contract are very happy today to see us turn the page on that. Councillor Caudry offered some of the reasons why at the time council made that decision, but I think the main one is that the staff that were in the department at the time, and I know that none of them are now with the city, but at the time they made a gross miscalculation of how much organics the city would produce. And it turned out in retrospect, it was more of a back of an envelope calculation than it was fact-based. And when council gets poor information, we make poor decisions. And I think that is probably one of the very poor decisions that we made. So happily, today is a day for turning the page. But having said that, I must say this report has only been live, as I understand it, for the last 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I have received a lot of varied correspondence from my constituents on this, and one of the key issues is that plastics in the organic stream. And I just wonder how confident this city is that we have appropriately consulted the community and that the community is in agreement with this direction.
Mr. Mayor, the rigor around getting to this point in time was quite a bit of work that we did in the back end with a consultant in terms of modeling participation rates, capture rates, et cetera. Those are all available in a set of memos that have been, I believe, put on the Councillor Share Drive for their information. So if councillors wish, they can certainly go on and take a look at those memos. It's pretty well clearly laid out in terms of what numbers we'll expect.
Yeah, that's not the question I'm asking, though. I mean, I'm sure you've done your due diligence this time. I don't think we're going to repeat the last error. But my question is about the public consultation and the public buy-in to the new plan. And I understand the desire to expedite this process so that we can start saving the money from the put and pay. I understand that, but I'm not confident, having only seen the report in the last 2 weeks, that we've really engaged the public in something that is a very public matter. Every one of us participates in these programs. So what kind of public consultation has been done, and how confident are we that the public is on board with this direction?
Mr. Mayor, the information contained in those detailed technical memos is based on other municipal more mature programs within the province, and we're relying on what's happened in those municipalities to project what would happen in Ottawa. I think it's fairly accurate.
And it doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling, because I really feel that this is about our city and our constituents and our community and our participation. And I think that there should have been a more robust consultation with our community than relying on information extrapolated from other communities.
I'll let maybe legal can chime in, Mr. Mayor, but there was no public consultation because this was the renegotiation of a private contract on a number of measures. But as I said, part of the purpose was to address the Auditor General's concerns, address some of the flaws in the contract, and enhance a program for our residents.
No, and I think you do all that, and I don't disagree, and I think that we're certainly moving in the right direction. The report only went live for 2 weeks, and I think once it's live, I think there could have been more of an attempt to hear directly from the public. And I know members of council heard, I certainly heard lots, but would have liked to have a little bit more time with it to really understand the views of my residents, because they were very varied what came in.
Mr. Mayor, just maybe to add what I've said about the modeling, et cetera, we have heard also through some of the focus groups that our communications staff have done that the yuck factor is a huge barrier. And that's the biggest barrier we've heard. The yuck factor, insects, smells, maggots, you can go on and on. That has been the barrier. That is pretty clear, I think, in what we've heard from the public about this program.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak before the chair of the committee speaks? No. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Pretty much all that can be said about coffee pods and plastic and dog poop has been at this point, but allow me to sum up on what I see are the key points to the decision in front of us. To that just raised by my colleague about public consultation, I think I would take a different view on this one, which is the public consultation all took place in the past few years about what are the impediments to participating in the program? Why aren't you doing it? What are the obstacles? With that information and what we knew of the failings or weaknesses of the existing Orga World contract, our staff, thank you to our city manager, our legal staff, and many others, went back and renegotiated with finally a willing partner at Orga World in order to try to address what we knew were the obstacles. So we do not come forward with a renegotiated labor contract with bus drivers or others to the public and say, now what do you think? We'd like to consult before we sign this. In the same sort of way, this is not a direct parallel, but this is a renegotiated contract that comes to council for approval, but based on, not circumventing, based on what we know of our own constituents' behavior. And I think what's really critical here is something that I said at committee 2 days ago, is that you can stick to the view that the public, people at large, might someday, with enough education, become a perfect green citizen and design a program that only allows those who are that perfect citizen to feel good enough to be part of it. Or you can recognize at some point there are real obstacles to people participating. They may be in their own minds, they may be physical, but they're obstacles and they're not doing it. Entrenching ourselves in a hardened position and hoping that they will do better is not getting us anywhere. We've had to move to them. Now, not move entirely and say we're going to come and take it from your kitchen counter for you, or whatever it may be, but to address the main obstacles we heard. And that so-called ick factor, particularly people in multi-residential buildings, so being able to have an impermeable bag container to bring it down, was one of the main obstacles that we heard, and this contract is helping to address that. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that this contract is about more than just those couple of items that I mentioned, and we've spent a long time debating. It's a big contract trying to address a number of issues, and above all, better value for the citizens, better value for our money, more convenience. Plastics, the growth of use of single-use plastics, multi-use plastics, they all become waste in the end globally, is a great concern to me. But there's nothing about this new approach that's going to be an incitement to the residents of Ottawa to buy more plastics and use more plastics. The bags that we expect, the vast majority of bags we expect to be used as containers, are those that you and I got from the grocery store when we forgot to bring the reusable bag that we all wanted to bring but somehow just don't have with us when we're there at the counter. You know what I'm talking about. So, not the perfect green citizen either. Those bags are out there. And until, in a different approach, on a different day, plastic bags may become banned in Ottawa, globally, they're there and they're out there. Let's use them for our citizens. We're not saying you have to go out and buy a new bag. Use all the bags you've got, and if you run out, well, then you may want to or need to. So I don't expect any more plastic to go in to our landfill than is now. I don't expect any more contamination of the stream from plastic than currently occurs, where people are, in fact, putting bags in that they're not supposed to in the green bin. But really importantly, with this contract, we now have the ability to, as a council decision in a year or 2 years, maybe sooner, make it mandatory that the only bags are compostable ones. We're not doing that now because there isn't a uniform standard provincially and because we didn't want to impose that cost initially for people. We wanted to try and make that shift. Direction was given to staff to continue working with industry on the pods, on the bags. That's part of this. That was amended at committee. That's part of this motion now. Finally, I just want to make a point to residents that, quote, don't bother to participate in this program because they're opposed to it or they have a physical obstacle. I think I need to issue a warning to you, which is you're out of excuses. If you really are just making excuses, oh, it's too icky. Well, that's not there anymore. We've taken it away from you. If you said, I would participate if, we've taken away all the ifs. And one more of the ifs that exists that some people don't know is you can get a smaller container. You can contact the city, contact your councillor, say my container is too big, it's too awkward, I can't handle it, I have nowhere to store it. There is a smaller container. We might do a better job of making that known. They're out there. So that's one more obstacle that we've removed.
Wrap up, councillor.
Thank you. So I think we've done all we can to make it convenient. It's your turn now, I'd say to our residents. Otherwise, you're just offloading the cost on your neighbor who is doing the right thing, who is participating, and I don't think anyone sees that as fair. So this is a better deal for taxpayers, it's more convenient, and I think we can deal with the plastics problem in the coming months or years, just not today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just before we vote on the Orga World contract and enhancements to the Green Bin program, I'd like to take a moment to thank our City Manager, Steve Kanalakis, Kevin Wiley, Marilyn Journeau, David White, Isabel Jasmine, and CMO staff for their many months of ongoing discussions and negotiations with Orga World to finalize the recommendations that are before us. Un grand merci à toute l'équipe.
Big thank you to the whole team who worked hard in order to bring us this proposal today.
Period of unprecedented change in the solid waste services, with significant provincial legislative changes, a change in ownership at Orga World, and changes in the management team undertaking these discussions with Orga World. Staff have worked tirelessly to provide options that improve the contract terms and enhance services for residents. With respect to the public consultation, I agree with Councillor Chernyshenko. The public consultation, first and foremost, we had the public meeting, which lasted 4.5 hours at the Environment and Climate Protection Committee. And secondly, I have heard nothing but positives when I've been out and about in the community. People are saying, thank goodness you're going to allow the use of plastic bags. And that's something that we've heard for a long time. And I think the best public consultation is often that consultation with ordinary homeowners and renters that you meet on the street, at shopping malls, and the like. So staff have worked tirelessly to provide options that improve the contract terms and enhance services for the residents. I believe there are many elements for the recommended contract that provide good value for taxpayers and residents. Cette nouvelle proposition améliore.
This new proposal will improve the agreement and offer more value to residents.
Reluctance to use the green bin because of the so-called yuck factor, and staff have put forward a recommendation that responds to these specific concerns that we've heard from the public. The recommendation also eliminates the current overpayments for unused capacity, does not extend the length of the current contract, and will eliminate the cost of ongoing litigation and arbitration. The proposed contract will provide service enhancements and cost 15 cents per household per month, substantially cheaper than the bags that you buy at various hardware and grocery stores. Orga World has agreed to spend nearly $4 million for odor controls, and this is something Councillor DeRuse has raised with us. And we'll be bringing green bins to dog parks starting next year. For un prix très abordable,
for a very affordable cost, we will allow residents to use the green bins that will be found in dog parks next year.
Comprehensive waste diversion strategy early in the next term of council, and we'll be spending special attention on how we can improve our communications with residents to strengthen our diversion rates. But this important, wide-ranging discussion is not what is before us today. What we're being asked to approve is the amendments to the existing agreement that, quite frankly, was, as you know, and we've heard time and time again, was one of the worst signed agreements in the city's history. Council outreach to educate residents will be critical to the success of these service changes, and are needed to meet our diversion targets. If this report passes today, we will need all of you to get behind the program and help communicate these service changes to the residents we serve. I'd like to thank Councillor Chernyshenko for his leadership throughout the debate on this report, and members of the Environment and Climate Protection Committee for their good work. There is much more to be discussed regarding our waste diversion strategy, and I look forward to seeing the results of the research into the best practices and to debating these issues in the next term, should we all be fortunate enough to be re-elected. Plusieurs des éléments débattus.
Many of the items that were debated will be part of the review of the waste management strategy, but this is not for today.
We pointed out, voting against this is in essence voting for the status quo, which is not a good deal for taxpayers, and it's clearly not working from a waste management point of view. Again, I want to thank our staff under the able leadership of City Manager Steve Kanalakis for their dedication that was required to bring this negotiated agreement to Council for our consideration. So on the report, yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Nussbaum.
No.
Councillor Kakish.
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor McKenney.
No.
Councillor Moffat. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Middick.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor Kadri?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
Oui.
Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Blais?
Oui.
Councillor Harder?
Yes.
Councillor Manette?
Oui.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
19 yeas, 3 nays.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The next item that was held, it was by Councillor Shirelli. He no longer needs it to be held, is 2720 Richmond Road. Carried. I don't believe, did anyone hold the reserves item? I had it tagged, but no. Okay. Next is zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment 3071 Riverside Drive, modification au règlement de zonage et au plan officiel 3071 Promenade Riverside. We have a motion by Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Tierney. Please, Councillor Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the mixed-use building fronts on Riverside Drive, and whereas the height recommended by staff in the original report was 3 stories, therefore be resolved that the height of the mixed-use building be returned to the original staff report recommendation of 3 stories and 13.5 meters, and be it further resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to everyone. It's certainly easy to question what harm the motion my colleague is putting on the floor does, simply increasing building height and density for a building fronting Riverside from 2 to 3 stories. This despite the fact that the Planning Committee heard from delegations, debated and discussed this file, and voted to decrease the height from 3 stories to 2. This file has an 11-year history in the Mooney's Bay Riverside Park community, 11 years. Previously owned by the Public School Board, the city purchased the land with the intent to control how development unfolds. Control. A community-led, council-approved concept plan was developed. And what was the purpose of a concept plan? To direct and shape development, not guarantee what happened, but with community input to help direct and shape. And so there's been a significant process here on this file. The concept plan called for low and medium density residential housing and a park. It was silent on a commercial or residential strip fronting Riverside Drive. In 2014, the city transferred the land to the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation with the intent of them selling this property. In 2015, after getting elected, I met with various community groups, local organizations, church groups, schools, anyone that wanted to talk about this file to get a true sense of where the community stood. 2016, Canoe Bay, having gone through their process, the OCDLC identified Canoe Bay as a successful bidder. And there was a requirement to come to FEDCO staff in the autumn of 2016 to update the committee and council that the original concept plan had changed and was now being realigned with the Canoe Bay plan. And that caused a lot of concern in the community. The community was engaged and invested in this process, and they felt that there was a lack of consultation and public process to be engaged with the revised plan that was being proposed by FEDCO. In 2017, when I hosted community meetings with Canoe Bay and the community, 2 very well-attended community meetings, 250 and 200 people, third floor of this commercial residential strip was not there. It was always proposed as 2 floors, and the third floor came in after the fact. When you factor in some of the pushback in the community about the overall density, traffic issues, the loss of a buffer that was in the original concept, housing types that have changed, the addition of the commercial residential strip, there are a lot of reasons within the community why they would be upset and why they're pushing back and why they've raised concerns. And the motion that was brought to committee, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, was about striking the right balance. It wasn't to vote against this file. There's some sound planning rationale for this file to be approved today, and I did support this and vote in favor of the overall file at committee. But this was about striking the right balance within the community who are beyond tired after 11 years. It's been an 11-year journey. Many in the community, including myself, are dissatisfied with the process used by the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation. I've got 2 public inquiries I'll be filing at the end of today's meeting. And that there have been a number of changes made to this proposal during this journey. So if you take the item that Councillor Harder is moving today in complete isolation, you may wonder why I'm pushing back. But you have to understand the greater picture and how this file has evolved, a number of changes and pushbacks within the community, and this is really about striking an overall balance within the community. So, Mr. Mayor, the committee dealt with this. The committee voted to lower the building heights, and now my colleague is putting a motion on the table today to increase that height and density in the community. I'm asking that council vote against that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I chair the Ottawa Community Lands Corporation, and we work under the mandate given to us by the city, which is not just to get money for the city, but is also to make sure that the kind of developments we get, that we have some say in how they go about doing it. I can't get into what we do because those are all done in confidence, but I will talk about the planning committee meeting. I was there. I heard the small number of people who came out to speak to it. I didn't hear any of them talking about this building. I'd heard a lot of them talking about how many units there are going to be, et cetera. So I've looked over the whole plan report that this planning committee did on this. The zoning that we're putting on there would allow buildings in the residential part to go up to 6 stories. The developer has brought them down to 4 stories because the community asked that it be less intensive. They actually put in the commercial was put in fairly early on in our deliberations because we had requests coming that people could use local residential commercial there, some from residents, some from city staff, from other different places. So it was actually a requirement when the land was sold that there be some commercial to provide local services because there's a fair number of people going to be living there, mostly seniors because of senior retirement residents and partial care residents. They don't cause a lot of issues in communities. I know any of us that have seniors residences know that they don't. The problem that comes with this building is really quite strange. It's right on a major arterial. It was actually originally shown as a 2-story building, one long building. With discussions on the site plan, with residents, they actually broke it into 2 buildings in order to give green space in between and make a nice walkway going through, which improved the look of it enormously. So they didn't stay with what was originally done with the things. Then because you now have 2 buildings and providing services in those buildings to be really meeting accessibility, they may legally not have to do it today, but they will in a few years' time. They should have elevators in these buildings. The new buildings usually do. But that means 2 elevators instead of 1. And to handle that cost, they went to a 3rd story. Interestingly enough, the residents won't even see that 3rd story because between this building and where the residents live are the 4-story seniors buildings on a little bit higher elevation, so they're completely screened from that direction. You'll only see them really from the road, possibly a little bit of an angle. And I don't see why that is going to create a problem in it. It wasn't raised during the meeting by the residents who spoke at the meeting. It was raised by the councillor after they had spoken. And it almost was like the committee was saying, well, we want to help you out in some way because you put a lot of effort into it, and he has. I think I say to Councillor Brockton, you did a huge amount of work on this to make sure people knew what was going on, that you listened to people, and that's important in communities. I think you do an excellent job in that. But I don't think this is actually going to make a difference to actually what it's going to look like or how it's going to function, but it can make a difference in the economic value of it. It could lead to an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board. It could lead to delays. It could lead to all sorts of things. And I think if you look at the layout with that walkway that goes between the buildings and the little green space there, and the sitting down space that they were able to add into this because they separated the 2 buildings, makes it such a better development. And our job isn't to just help councillors out, unfortunately. Our job is citywide, what should we be doing on these developments? That's for the position that community lands take it. We don't look at it just from the residents, but we do what we can. We move lower density around the edges. We put the extra parkland in. There's a huge number of things that were added in there to make it a better development, that if somebody had just bought that land from scratch and done what they want to do without having the major restrictions that we put on these when they sell land, I don't think we'd have as good a development as we're getting in this particular one. So I really support the motion from Councillor Harder. I think there was a very close vote at Planning Committee, and one person had left who was actually planning to vote the other way. It could have been a tie vote even, if that had happened. But I think it's still a better development with the 3 stories than with 2, because I don't want to see them going back to one big building, which they could do. And the zoning in there, they could make the other buildings go up higher to get more residential in. We don't want that either. So I think that what you've got is actually a really, and I think you actually spoke to that, and you've said that yourself, that basically, I know it's an imposition, because any new development, and any of us that have had new developments come into their community knows that it's an imposition on the local community. It changes things. You've gone from backing on a school to backing on a development area. I had that happen with another building, and it caused a lot of consternation, but at the end, we came up with something that much higher than we wanted, but it actually works. And I think this one will work as well. So I would suggest that we actually vote in favor of Councillor Harder's motion. I think it actually is a good one. The design committee liked it, and all sorts of other things have done, and they've made changes in incorporating all of those things into it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a brief moment to explain why I supported the staff recommendation when this came to Planning Committee. And before I do so, I want to acknowledge Councillor Wilkinson's comments. Councillor Brockington has been nothing but diligent, thorough, consultative, and worked very hard prior to Planning Committee and since to speak to each of us and to ensure that we had a sense of what the issues were, both substantive and process. So I entered into Planning Committee with an open mind on this issue. But at the end of the day, I supported the staff recommendation for a number of reasons. I think the most important was intensification can be a very difficult file, a difficult word, and as a councillor representing an urban ward, I know all about the fact that sometimes when you get proposals that increase the density on a particular lot, there is an instinctive negative reaction to that. And I think what I've often been challenged with is making sure that I'm clear in my mind what the pros and cons of intensification are. We know, I think, what many of the positive ones are. We know that when we build on existing infrastructure, we save current and future taxpayers from having to build and maintain and operate new infrastructure. We know it's good for transit. We know it's good for walkable communities. And so that's the pro side. The con side is we have to make sure that intensification is appropriate, from shadowing to setback issues, privacy concerns, design, architecture. We need to make sure that when we do intensify, we do it in a way that's appropriate and sensitive to the needs of existing residents. What happened in this case, I think, is a proposal came forward, and I'm not speaking to whatever the process failures were, and I'm sensitive to those, but at the end of the day, when I listened to the delegations who were there and took the time to speak to us, I didn't hear specific concerns about the increased density on this particular building that led me to think that there was a reason to lower or reduce the height. And moreover, I think we really have an important job to make sure that residents understand when density is a positive thing and when it isn't. Councillor Leeper in this very same meeting supported a staff recommendation to increase the height of a building in his ward from 6 stories to 12 stories, notwithstanding that I think every delegate who came from his ward to that meeting was opposed to it. But he made the calculation that this was density that worked in this case. And I think similarly, my assessment of the Riverside application was a 3rd story could actually contribute to the overall application, knowing and understanding that these can be sensitive issues and that the issue of density and intensification really does need to be evaluated to a certain extent on a case-by-case basis. So that just explains a little bit why I supported the staff recommendation, but I do want to thank Councillor Brockington because I think he's demonstrated exemplary leadership in terms of driving this file forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Eglai, please.
Actually, Councillor Nussbaum sort of covered some of the things I wanted to talk about, so I'll pull myself off the list.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question to staff. I'm not on planning committee, so I wasn't privy to the details of the discussions there, but can staff explain the discrepancy between the 6 stories for the retirement home versus the 3 that was recommended for the mixed-use building?
Mr. Mayor, there's no discrepancy. The concept plan and the official plan amendment was to cap 6 stories for the retirement home, and staff felt that a 3-story mixed-use building was appropriate at the front along Riverside Drive.
Okay, so did the applicant initially come in with those, or were they even higher for the 6 and 3 for the 2 separate buildings?
The applicant came in with the 6-story retirement home, and at the time they came in pre-consulted with, they had a version of 2-story and 3-story along Riverside Drive, but that it evolved to 3-story during the application process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So on the motion, on the amendment, okay, on Councillor Harder and Tierney's amendment, yeas and nays have been called.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Yes.
Councillor Kakish.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley, Councillor El-Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor DeRuse.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Middick.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
No.
Conseil Fleury.
No.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Yes.
Councillor Kadri.
No.
Conseil Cloutier.
No.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Sorry? Councillor Blais.
No.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Conseil Monette.
Yes.
Mayor Watson.
Yes.
15 yeas, 7 nays.
Councillor Brockington would like to dissent on, I'll read out the wording, 2-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial. The yellowed section, Councillor, that you gave me, is that correct? And then also on item number 2, the words mixed-use residential commercial. So with recording those dissents on the motion as amended, carried. Thank you. Disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority suite à donner des articles ratifiés par les comités en vertu de pouvoirs délégués. That Council received the list of items approved by its committees under delegated authority attached as document 1. Received. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Councillor Nussbaum, please.
That Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee Report 32, Community and Protective Services Committee Report 30, Environment and Climate Protection Committee Report 19, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 32, Planning Committee Reports 59A and 60, Transportation Committee Report 30, and the report from the City Clerk and Solicitor's Office entitled Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of February 28, 2018 be received and adopted as amended.
The motion carried. Motions of which notice has been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. Councillor Dean, seconded by Councillor McKenney, and there's a revised motion, and I thank Councillor Deans for the memo to clarify the original motion, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think because there has been a minor change to the motion, I will read it out, and thank you for proposing the final paragraph. Whereas for decades, organizations and individuals have worked diligently to increase awareness of women's rights and bring the issues of parity to the forefront, whereas the United Nations has declared that the critical mass necessary for women to make a visible impact on the style and content of political decision-making is 30%, and whereas our federal government in 2015 created the first gender-balanced cabinet and has just released the first federal budget built to recognize the importance of gender equality in our society, whereas other major Canadian cities such as Vancouver have created special committees that bring forward issues of concern and work to ensure gender equality within their policies and initiatives, and whereas currently Ottawa City Council has a female representation of less than 17%, and whereas currently Ottawa advisory committees have an underrepresentation of women, therefore be it resolved that Ottawa City Council recommend that the mayor and city staff examine the options for including the role of a council representative special liaison for women's issues and a women's bureau to provide a gender lens on our policies and practices and provide the results in the 2018 to 22 governance report. And be it further resolved that the city clerk and solicitor review the city's recruitment, selection, and appointment practices for advisory committees with the goal of appointing 50% representation of women in the next term of council. So, Mr. Mayor, let me just speak to this briefly. There's no doubt that in the last year or so, there has been a renewed focus on gender issues. And I think that we are all witnessing positive change at all levels of government and in all factions of our society. This motion alone, I can tell you, has garnered a great deal of interest and attention, and I personally have been overwhelmed by the outpouring of support that I have received in putting this motion forward. I also wanted to acknowledge partner organizations including FCM, COWI, and the Conseil des Montréalais in Montreal, who have been working with Councillor McKenney and I in developing this motion. And I just wanted to give a shout out to COWI, who have really been promoting gender equality at Ottawa City Hall for the last 14 years. And I think you should be proud of the peach scarves wardrobe choices that you see at the council table today. So I think what that is a visual indicator of your success. So thank you for all of the work that you have done. It's clear to me that there is an emerging consensus that we as a city need a stronger and more sustained focus on women's issues locally. While we've been making incremental progress through our diversity and inclusion branch, we have not gone far enough to advance gender equity in our city. What is clearly evident is that this will not happen organically. If we do nothing, nothing will change. And that is not good enough. It's not good enough for me, and it's not good enough for our community. We need to move from a passive approach to a more targeted strategy. By making gender a fundamental consideration in the development and implementation of policy, we can do just that. This means that we must consistently look at how our policies and programs affect women and men differently. I just wanted to give you an example because people keep saying to me, well, give me an example of where there's a problem. Well, we don't know what we don't know, and we want to look at all of our policies. But I'm just going to give you an example of a call that I received this week from a constituent who served as a federal public servant for her career and has recently retired. And, you know, many seniors are looking for healthy lifestyles. And so she has been working out in programs in our community centers. And her observation, she said this to me, she said, my observation is that women and men work out differently. And it's not every man, it's not every woman, but generally speaking, they work out differently. Men prefer to be in the weight room, lifting weights and doing whatever men do in the gym. And women prefer to be in programs. It's not a universal truth, but it's largely true. But our financial structure is that we charge by program. So this woman said, I'm a retired federal public servant, I have a good pension, I can afford to participate in 4 programs a week. But many of the other women in the program can't, especially women, aging women on fixed incomes. And so, but men have one price that they pay for that gym membership. And so if we're looking at that program through a gender lens, perhaps there are changes that we could make to ensure that both women and men can work out in a manner that they choose at a price that they can afford. And that's the sort of thing. That's just an example, but it's every department. It's public transit, urban planning, winter operations, and every other department. That's why it's critical that Council pass this motion today so we can begin the important work necessary to find out how and where we can do better in this city. And I just wanted to end with this thought. This is by no means a battle of the sexes. I recently came across a quote that I think is appropriate for today, and that is this: everything, literally everything, every single thing that you can do to make the world better for women also makes the world better for men. And I believe that to be true. I said it before and it bears repeating. As a city, we need to take action, determined, concerted, focused action to get the ball rolling. And I would appreciate the support of all my colleagues here today in getting that ball rolling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
This is, I think, a good step forward. We already have the equity and inclusion lens, which mentions women, but it's not specifically that way. And I just want to say on that particular one, I know that the city manager sent a memo out in January encouraging managers to use that lens a little more. But I do know that OC Transpo a few years ago, when they made changes, on the behalf of Cowie, I asked them to use it when they looked at the impact of those changes, and they did. They found it was very, very useful and actually made for better service. And it wasn't a lot of work to do. So I just wanted to say this is another step forward in making sure we look at things differently. It doesn't mean it's going to cost a lot more. It does mean you're probably going to end up making better decisions. So I thank Councillor Deans and McKenney for bringing this forward and raising the issue, because it's something I think that is very appropriate at this time with everything else that's happening in the province and nationally, and that we can be among those which actually embrace this and move forward in some way. So thank you, Councillor Deans and McKenney.
Thank you, Councillor. Excuse me, Councillor Chernushenko, please.
Thank you very much. I just felt compelled to share a statistic in the wake of a very successful Olympic Games. Councillor Dean's point about we all do better. A study was done that looked at those countries that supported female sport and female athletes. Their women won more medals at the Olympics. Their men also won more medals at the Olympics. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Let me offer my thanks to Councillor Deans and McKenney for the motion they brought forward that provides us an opportunity to continue the important dialogue on inclusivity in the City of Ottawa. This motion requests that staff presents the findings of the research and the outcomes of their consultation in the 2018-2022 governance report, which will be dealt with by the next council at their very first meeting. I think that much has been gained by having these discussions, and towards that end, I've tabled a friendly amendment to include the city's recruitment, selection, and appointment practices for advisory committees with the goal of appointing 50% representation of women in the next term of council. That's an area where we can have a real substantive impact because we have control over the appointment process. But at the same time, we also have to do a better job of encouraging women to apply for these various advisory committees. It's important to remember that the City of Ottawa remains committed to ongoing equity and diversity through the ongoing use of the diversity and inclusion lens, which is used when making all policy and operational decisions at the city. And as the city manager's memo pointed out, we still have to do a better job of ensuring that all of the items are put through that lens when they're brought to City Council. And that being said, there's always new and innovative ways to improve and strengthen our commitment to inclusivity. And the motion before you formalizes the opportunity to have this important discussion and to hear from all members of Council. I also want to echo Councillor Dean's comments to thank Cowie for being here today and for your persistent and passionate and thoughtful arguments on not just this issue, but so many issues, particularly at budget time. And I guess what we should do is maybe invite all the representatives of Cowie after the meeting to get a group shot with everyone from Council. So on the motion, carried. Well, yeas and nays. Okay. I think we have
Councillor Nussbaum?
Yes.
Councillor Kakish?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley? Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor McKinney?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat? Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Eglai?
Yes.
Councillor Middick?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Conseil Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor Kadri?
Yes.
Conseil Cloutier?
Oui.
Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Conseil Blais? Councillor Harder?
Yes.
Conseil Manette?
Oui.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
22 yeas, 0 nays.
So why don't maybe we get the members of Council to come in the center and ask our friends from Cowie and other organizations to take a quick picture. We'll just have a 2-minute recess. Our next motion is by Councillor Fleury, seconded by Councillor Middick. Councillor Fleury, this is an annual tradition, so the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. En effet, c'est une tradition.
Yes, indeed, it's an annual tradition. We want to support people in supporting physical activity.
City Council declares Saturday, June 2nd, 2018 to be National Health and Fitness Day in Ottawa, and be further resolved that City Council approved that the city offer 2-for-1 public swimming at all 20 city-operated swimming pools and 2-for-1 admission to all 17 city-operated weight and cardio rooms on Saturday, June 2nd, 2018 in recognition of the 2018 National Health and Fitness Day.
Thank you. Adopté. Merci. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. A motion by Councillor Taylor, seconded by myself, with respect to bidding on the 2021-2024 AMO conference bid. There's a time requirement on suspension. Carried. Councillor Taylor, please, our AMO rep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And as you indicated, it's the city's desire to bid once again on the upcoming set of Association of Municipalities of Ontario's annual general meetings and conferences for 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. And there is a time requirement in order to have the bid go in, and it does require, AMO has requested a municipal council resolution for that bid. So I'm just going to read the be it resolved, the motions on the screen. Therefore, be it resolved that Council formally support the bid to host the 2021, 22, 23, and 24 AMO AGMs, conferences, and trade shows. And be it further resolved that Council grant authority to Ottawa Tourism to bid on the city's behalf to host the 2021, 22, 23, and 24 AMO AGMs, conferences, and trade shows.
On the motion, carried. Adopté. Thank you. There are a number of other oh, no, sorry. Any other motions requiring suspension of the rules? No. Notice is a motion for consideration of subsequent meetings. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. I have one seconded by Councillor Fleury. Whereas payday loan establishments are currently licensed and regulated by the Province of Ontario under the Payday Loans Act 2008, and whereas there are currently 55 payday loan establishments licensed by the Province of Ontario in the City of Ottawa, includes areas of significant geographic concentration, and whereas Section 154.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 authorizes municipalities to define the area in which a payday loan establishment may or may not operate and limit the number of payday loan establishments in any defined area in which they are permitted, effective January 1st, 2018. Therefore, be it resolved that Council direct the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development to examine options to establish a cap on the number of payday loan establishments, detail measures to reduce concentration, and bring forward amendments to the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008-250 and report back to Planning Committee. And be it further resolved that the Council direct the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services to analyze the effectiveness of a licensing regime in light of the proposed zoning strategy and take into account that payday loan establishments are currently licensed by the province, and to report the findings to the Community and Protective Services Committee. So we'll have that debate next week. The next notice of motion is by Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Blais. Conseiller Monette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's actually two notices of motions. I'll do both of them. First one, both of them are festivals that are going on in Orleans. One in May, it's a new festival. It's a Putzin Fest. And the one in June is the Beer Festival that we had last year. I'll just do the therefores, if that's okay. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council approved a road closure for Centrum Boulevard from Breezeball Crescent to Prestone Drive from 6 p.m. on Thursday, May 10th to 6 a.m. on Monday, May 14th for the Orleans Putzin Fest, providing it meets the requirements, conditions, and approvals of a special events advisory team. For the Craft Beer Festival, it's similar. It's therefore be it resolved that Council approved a road closure for Centrum Boulevard from Breezeball Crescent to Prestone Drive from 8 a.m. on Thursday, June 7th to 9 a.m. on Sunday, June 10th for the Orleans Craft Beer Festival, providing it meets the requirements, condition, approval, special events advisory team seat. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I think you've talked about both festivals, lots of parties in Orleans this summer. Thank you. We'll discuss those at the next meeting. Are there any other notices of motion Oh, I'm sorry, I think I have one by Councillor Leeper, I believe. Council, this is a notice of, okay, notice of motion. Okay, go ahead.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a long motion worth of whereases, but the fundamental action of it would be to help Share the Road Ontario in its effort to coordinate a municipal response to get annual funding for cycling infrastructure in the provincial budget. We have been the beneficiary of one-off rounds of cycling infrastructure money from the province. Those have been very useful to help us build out our cycling network. The motion would ask that we urge the provincial government to recommend that the Ministry of Transportation include an annual investment in cycling infrastructure in its capital budget, urge Mayor Jim Watson to write a letter of support to the Minister of Transportation, encourage other municipalities across Ontario through the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to join with the City of Ottawa in calling on the province to act. I'm looking forward to chatting about that at our next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other notices of motion this time? No. Notice of intent, avis d'intention. Notice of intent from the City's Integrity Commissioner, meetings investigator, to submit a closed meeting investigation report for consideration at the 11th of April 2018 Council meeting. Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Councillor Nussbaum, second by Councillor Deans, please. It's after.
Que les règlements énumérés à l'ordre du jour sur la rubrique motion.
That the regulations under 3 readings be read and passed. Confirmation bylaw.
Conseil Nussbaum, s'il vous plaît.
Le règlement suivant soit lu et adopté.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of March 28, 2018.
Rockington has 2 inquiries. Councillor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council knows, we've just dealt with the Canoe Bay file on Riverside Drive, which included a lot of work between myself and the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation. There's some questions that have come up over that experience. First is, when can or will the opportunity occur for Council to review the processes of the city on the OCLDC, such that Council could require that there be an improved opportunities for public consultation for lands that have been turned over to the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation? And the second question is, what steps would be required for the local councillor to receive notice of and to be permitted to attend board meetings of the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation when matters in her or his ward are under consideration? I'm filing those 2 inquiries. Thank you.
Merci. Do we have any other? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have Councillor Tierney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll read the inquiry out. In advance of the 2019 budget and the new term of council, many residents have expressed interest in greater funding for roads. To ensure that we have an accurate, current information in front of the next term of council, we need to look at utilizing live interactive online maps for all our roads' life cycles, conditions, resurfacing data, and forecasts, similar to other interactive maps used by LA and the County of Sonoma. And just to add on to that, I think we even had more discussions in the last budget cycle. I think a lot of people indicated they wanted to see more money for roads, and clearly I look forward to that to being in everybody's platform this upcoming October. I've even spoken to Councillor Shirelli, our chair of IT, feels this is a great idea, great initiative, and we just want to be ready and in a position so the next council that does come in has the ability to see what's right in front of us. We need these tools to be able to help us from a budgetary perspective and figure out what roads need the conditions. So I'm moving that inquiry forward, and we want to be prepared so when the rubber hits the road, we're ready to make decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? Okay, adjournment. Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Proceedings of the City Council meeting of March 20th, 2018 be adjourned.
Carried. Wish everyone who's celebrating Easter the very best this holiday season. Meeting adjourned.
It's going to affect the very underpinnings of their business model.
I'm not sure because, political advertising in terms of the amount of money it brings in is still relatively small. A lot of, the future of the business model depends on how much advertisers are still willing to, spend money to target users on social media and whether they find the platforms useful even if they're restricted in how they advertise or the amount of data they have access to. So far, we haven't seen a dramatic move from advertisers to pull out of the platform. So I get the sense that, until that happens, until advertisers believe that there's an issue for the reputation of their brands by advertising on Facebook, until that happens, I'm not really sure that this is going to be have a dramatic impact on the business model of social media.
So they'll likely want to go along with this then, I would think, because this is potentially the solution to the PR troubles that they're all suffering from as a result of all of this.
I think so. Some of the big advertisers like Procter & Gamble and Unilever have been pushing Facebook and other companies too, YouTube, which is owned by Google, to sort of clean up some of the content that they allow on their platforms because they don't really want to be advertising next to hate speech or, pornography. So I think a lot of advertisers probably will see this as a good move. Anything that will increase the credibility of the platform and